everybody. Dr. Kristen here with another Abbey Research Reads. This time I want to talk to you about the book Troubled, which is by Kenneth Rosen, and the subtitle is The Failed Promise of America's Behavioral Treatment Programs. Now, this is part of the troubled teen industry research that Dr. Aaron and I have been deeply diving into as we go on here. And what I really, in a certain way, I think this is a pretty good beginner place to start. For the specific behavioral treatment programs, there's a lot of other elements of the troubled teen industry, but let's have a quick talk about the kind of residentially things. So he covers a couple things in this book through some vignettes of kids, Hazel, Mark, Avery, and Mike. And then he himself, Kenneth, is a survivor of one of these schools. And I use survivor intentionally because while there are rehabs and programs that are helpful to kids, and I know kids that have been at those, the ones that are run by licensed professionals and based on actual evidence, there are millions and millions more that aren't. And I'll link our institutional abuse resource list down below to kind of dig into it. But if you're really looking at kind of where do I even start? Where do I even begin to understand the depth and ugly and oh my God of this? I really think Troubled is a good one. I'm trying to find a kind of he summarizes something really, really easily, and I want to talk about it in particular. So here we go. Okay. So he says that this is in the prologue, in the introduction. Adolescence has always been turbulent, but the technological changes of the past few decades have complicated a child's most formative years in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. Worldwide, between 10 and 20% of children in 2013 experienced a mental disorder, with an increase of over 50% expected by the end of 2020. Today's parents agonize about disorders and issues they never faced when they were young, and many are uncertain of how to deal with those problems in their own children. Into this void, a cottage industry has grown. A couple points there. First of all of these numbers are pre-COVID. We know that globally, the mental health crisis is not just in adults. Children have been facing it in I think like incredibly disproportionately more even than adults. I want to also reiterate that the large majority of parents that send their kids to these programs are doing it because they think this is the best for their kids. For everybody who, has malicious intent, there are parents who are literally just trying to do the best they can. So the thing is that there was this market demand, right? And so all of these for-profit companies sprung up all around the country. And for me, one of the telltales of a behavioral treatment program being worth its salt is if it's for profit or nonprofit. I'll be really honest. The other thing too is that this industry is significantly more about the parents than it is about the kids. So there's a lot of money spent on advertising to make it seem that their kids are doing well. And then once their kids get there, there's no transparency. There's no way for the parents to actually understand what's going on. This is especially true in wilderness things where the kids are just left to kind of backpack through the woods and what that kind of looks like. But there's no transparency at all when it comes to now. Again, there are behavioral treatment programs where there is transparency, where the parents can talk to the kids' therapists, where they have evidence of kind of things like that. So the most insidious thing in this to me in the troubled teen industry is that because there's no regulation, except by individual licensure things for the humans in the building and not the program itself, it's incredibly difficult for parents to know the difference. So I want to talk you through a couple of the really salient points that he made about residential and wilderness programs in particular. So wilderness therapy, which is absolutely just, let's throw them out in the woods. And you've seen television shows about this. Wilderness therapy takes its cues from Manifest Destiny, adding a modicum of adventure therapy and experiential education. The psychiatric roots are due to they go back to the early 1900s, when kind of a tent therapy, when patients were isolated from other patients, literally living in tents. And it was prescribed for clients who were suffering psychological breaks, where it's like, okay, well, you can get through this alone. Let's just remove you from society. There was some initial promising research in the early 1900s, but since actual evidence-based practice has come in, this is actually seen to be much more detrimental than positive, and yet we still push it on kids. So where this else comes in is, you may have heard of Outward Bound or the National Outdoor Leadership School. Those are not for troubled teens. They are leadership programs that kids voluntarily choose to go to. The people that run these wilderness therapy programs take the stuff from Outward Bound and Knowles, which I have friends that did Knowles and loved it, chose to do it, got college credit for it, loved it, do Knowles, add some really, really dangerous psychological treatment methods, and voila, and then charge parents hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day. Some of the more famous ones were launched out of Brigham Young University graduates. We have the moralizing here, again, of values of what it means to be a good teenager. While some of these students absolutely have valid mental health crises, many of them are just not the right kind of teenager. So especially for the wilderness ones tend to be where parents send the misbehaving teenagers. There is a lot in there. And like I said, his book covers it really, really well. And now I want to kind of just draw all of our attentions to some of the residential stuff, which you would know maybe a little bit more from our other coverage, and also from Paris Hilton and her talk about residential programs. So this is residential schools in particular. So the Elan School, the Dozier School in Florida, they tend to be the model of a lot of other behavioral modification programs that don't exist in the out of doors. They have lockdown facilities. Even some wilderness programs do, I should say, include kind of the school in this model, but it's not nearly as popular in that one. There's corporal punishment. There's isolation tactics. There's threats against students. And they are constantly censored. Constantly. This is actually where the breaking code silence comes from. Whatever you say nothing in Northern Irish parlance. And there are long-term consequences that Kenneth points out that I'm really glad he brought up. Serious long-term consequences for being censored and told to repress emotional desires. It's like living in a police state, with controlling atmospheres tend to slowly taint the view of one's self-worth. Patients begin to question how terrible they were in the first place. They begin to vilify rather than victimize themselves. They become self-loathing, self-deprecating, and they begin to believe that they are more bad than good and therefore should not be alive at all. Can you imagine, as a parent, finding out that this thing that you thought you sent your kid to get better actually made them worse? The residential is usually the thing that parents are drawn to in these models because it removes them from society. And there's lots of evidence that being removed from your day-to-day life can really allow you to evaluate what's going on in some really productive ways. But so parents will pay more money for residential programs because, you know, it's more helpful or whatever. But then it also just means more secrets. And I keep saying parents pay because I want to bring up the other side of this. This is incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. It's part of the for-profit situation. So for middle class and upper class parents who can afford to send their kids here, that's damaging enough. But it's also become part of the school to prison pipeline in the United States. Instead of going to juvenile detention facilities, states will sometimes send their kids to here, and the states are paying for it. And sure, it's better than jail, and it might still be, but it is deeply psychologically damaging in its own right. The troubled teen industry is making some people a lot of money on the backs of teenagers, literally. There is limited evidence that any of these methods work in a wholehearted stance. Isolation actually never works there's no evidence that isolation in particular works to help someone mend their ways. There's a difference between isolation and isolation therapy and choosing to be alone with your thoughts. Being forced to do anything very rarely makes people grow in the ways that we choose them to grow. The final aspect of the troubled teen industry in particular is the complete lack of consent on the kids' part. There are some valid rehabs that kids are sent to against their consent, especially if they are inebriated at the time or high at the time. But a hallmark of a really good therapy program is that it needs the consent of the participant. But again, because these programs are for parents and not for the kids, the consent of the student isn't necessary. Kids are kidnapped literally in the middle of the night out of their beds. Experts tell the parents to make sure that all the siblings are out of the house so that the siblings aren't traumatized. It's a mess. Consent is key to change. So if you're taking these kids anywhere without their consent, they're not going to change. They're only going to get more traumatized. Like I said, if you're kind of early in the journey, or you're wondering about the scope of the troubled teen industry, or looking anything else like that, honestly, Troubled here by Kenneth Rosen is a really, really good example. Not only because of the research that went into it, but because it's he talks a lot about his personal experiences, the people that he went to school with, one of these residential schools with, that are now dead, either died by suicide or overdose. How very few of them live fulfilling lives. The internalized trauma of these places is intense, and he doesn't pull any punches. It's really clear that this industry needs to be regulated. There are baby steps towards regulation in some states. The federal government heretofore has not been interested in regulation. But this is a really good rallying cry to it. So once again, Troubled by Kenneth Rosen. The links to buy it on bookshop.com will be below, or check it out in your local library. My name is Dr. Kristen Donnelly. This has been Abbey Research Reads. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you like the rest of our kind of energy, make sure to subscribe to our sister channel, the General Abbey Research channel, where we talk about building empathy and understanding self and others. Talk to you next time. Bye.